global leader of eco-friendly future materials. Green tomorrow with POSCO.
Coming up on Arirang News, President Yoon is off to Boston. He's set to visit MIT for a session with scholars in the digital and bio sectors and Harvard Kennedy School to host a panel session on economic freedom and liberal democracy. President Yoon addresses the U.S. Congress in English, repeatedly drawing standing ovations from lawmakers. He highlights, together with the United States, that South Korea will play a role as being a compass for freedom. President Yoon also meets with leaders in the entertainment industries of South Korea and the U.S. for more cooperation between the two. Good evening. It's 9 p.m. here in South Korea. Thank you for joining us on Arirang News. We start with President Yoon's state visit to the U.S., where he's off to Boston, wrapping up his agenda in Washington, D.C. The president will visit the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, home to a world-class bio cluster. There he's scheduled to speak with leading scholars in the digital and bio sectors. Also, President Yoon will hold a roundtable with pundits and people working in innovation clusters and host a panel session at Harvard University's Kennedy School on economic freedom and liberal democracy. And in Washington, D.C., President Yoon addressed the U.S. Congress on Thursday local time. While referring to great American heroes of the Korean War, he said South Korea and the U.S. will play a key role in safeguarding the freedom of world citizens, repeatedly drawing standing ovations from the lawmakers. Our Oh Soo-young, traveling with the president, files this report.
Inspired by freedom, liberal democracy and human rights, South Korea and the United States will put their alliance in action as a compass for freedom in the world. That was the core of President Yoon's speech to a joint session of the US Congress on Thursday. Reflecting on the past 70 years of bilateral security ties, Yoon described how South Korea, by joining hands with the US, had grown from the ashes of the Korean War to become the world's 10th largest economy, based on liberal democracy and a free market system.
For over 70 years in the history of the alliance, we worked together in military and security sectors. We also expanded our cooperation in the economic field. Our relationship has evolved from one of unilateral assistance to a partnership that is mutually beneficial.
He noted that Korean companies are now contributing to the US economy, producing EV batteries, semiconductors and cars, and creating thousands of well-paid jobs. Going forward, he said the two countries will lead in innovation beyond security and foreign policy to work on cutting-edge technologies, including chips, artificial intelligence, bioscience and quantum technology. But beyond economic relations, Yoon presented how the alliance would jointly tackle challenges to the freedom and rights of citizens around the world. He highlighted human rights abuses in North Korea, describing what he called unspeakable and horrendous incidents where men and women were killed for violating COVID-19 measures, publicly executed for watching South Korean shows, and being shot in public for their religious faith. Yoon also condemned Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
It is an attempt to unilaterally changing the status quo with force. Korea strongly condemns the unprovoked armed attack against Ukraine.
Saying freedom and democracy are again under threat, Yoon said South Korea will rise to defend global citizens based on its own history of being invaded by North Korea and living up to its current economic capacity. He also thanked the members of Congress for unanimously adopting a resolution that welcomed his state visit. The document stressed the importance of the bilateral alliance for peace and security on the Korean Peninsula and across the Indo-Pacific region.
Receiving 23 standing ovations, President Yoon's speech marks the first time in 10 years that a South Korean leader has addressed the US Congress, the heart and soul of US democracy. Based on their shared universal values, he said the alliance will march towards the future for the freedom of humanity. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News, Washington, D.C.
President Yoon Suk-yeol has become the 7th South Korean leader to address a joint session of the U.S. Congress and the 5th to share his speech in English. Freedom was one of the main themes, while some historical figures, deep economic connections, and culture were also highlighted as well. Our Lee Dae-yeon has more.
President Yoon has become the 3rd world leader to address a joint meeting of Congress since President Biden took office. In his nearly 1-hour-long speech delivered in English, Yoon presented a blueprint of the South Korea-U.S. alliance as a global tie to protect liberty and peace. The term freedom appeared 46 times in the speech, more than Yoon has ever previously used the word during his presidency. A number of historical figures were also mentioned, including those who had contributed to the bilateral alliance during the Korean War.
The late John Conyers Jr., Sam Johnson, and Howard Coble were veteran congressmen who promoted freedom and democracy. The former Representative Charles Rangel has been a strong supporter of the alliance. Korea will never forget the great American heroes who fought with us to defend freedom.
Names of Korean businesses and K-pop stars were also brought up. When mentioning Hyundai Motors' plant in the state of Georgia, Yoon smiled and pointed at members from that state as the 2 elected members from Georgia stood up and applauded. Many world leaders might like to be invited to give a speech in a joint meeting of Congress, but the process can be demanding. A bipartisan group of congressional leaders should agree on the address, while a diplomatic strategy should also be made to persuade Congress. Yoon's speech marks the 7th time a South Korean president has addressed a joint meeting of Congress, and the first time in 10 years since former President Park Geun-hye did so in 2013. Ri Seung-man, the first president of South Korea, also made a speech in a joint meeting of Congress, followed by Roh Tae-woo and Kim Young-sam. With the exception of former presidents Kim Young-sam and Lee Myung-bak, other former South Korean leaders made speeches in English. Yoon, at the end of his speech, mentioned Roh's speech from 34 years ago, saying that Roh's dream to make the Indo-Pacific more important to Washington, with Korea contributing to the prosperity of the region, has now become a reality. He added Seoul will strengthen the rules-based order in the Indo-Pacific while taking a comprehensive approach to expanding cooperation with key partners. Lee Dae-yeon, Arirang News.
During a luncheon at the U.S. State Department after his congressional address, President Yoon Suk-yeol pledged to promote peace in the world through a brighter Seoul-Washington alliance. Our foreign affairs correspondent Choi Min-jung has the details.
Shortly after making an address to a joint session of Congress on Thursday, President Yoon was joined by U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris and Secretary of State Antony Blinken for lunch at the State Department. There, President Yoon vowed to develop the Seoul-Washington alliance in a way that expands practical benefits for the people of both countries.
우리의 미래는 과거보다 더 찬란할 것입니다. 우리 양국은 강력한 힘에 의한 평화를 구축하고 동아시아와 세계의 평화를 촉진하는 자유의 연대를 이끌어갈 것입니다.
Yoon said this would be done by further strengthening solidarity and cooperation in cutting-edge technologies, including semiconductors, quantum artificial intelligence, space, and cyber technology. He added that young talents of the 2 nations will learn from one another and build a free, peaceful, and prosperous Indo-Pacific region. U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris touted South Korea-U.S. relations as she thanked Yoon's leadership for enabling further progress for the 2 nations in areas across security, economy, and culture.
I believe our nations and our people are increasingly bound together in a shared future and a common destiny. We are more interconnected and interdependent than we have ever been. And that, I believe, is to the benefit of all of humanity.
And State Secretary Antony Blinken made a remark in Korean, saying the 2 countries go together.
It has been 70 years since the United States and the Republic of Korea formed our alliance, making official a bond that was forged by Korean and American soldiers in the crucible of war. Kachi Kapshida, we go together.
President Yoon said South Korea was able to rise from the ashes of war to become a country with global stature thanks to the U.S., and stated that the U.S. alliance has developed into the most successful alliance in history over the past 70 years. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
President Yoon Suk-yeol also became the first South Korean leader to receive a briefing on key security matters from top U.S. military officials during his visit to the Pentagon. Shin Ha-young reports.
During his trip to Washington, South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol also paid a visit to the Pentagon, where he received a briefing. The visit to the headquarters of national security and the U.S. Armed Forces is being viewed as a move to underscore South Korea-U.S. combined defense readiness, coming a day after Yoon and Biden announced the Washington Declaration aimed at bolstering extended deterrence against North Korea's evolving threats. Yoon met with U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin and was given a briefing on the U.S. surveillance and crisis response system at the Pentagon's National Military Command Center, marking the first time that a South Korean president has visited the center. South Korea's first deputy director of the National Security Office, who is traveling with the president, described it as a key command and control center that directly assists the U.S. president and military commanders in times of emergency. During the talks, President Yoon reiterated the importance of the Washington Declaration, saying that he completely trusts U.S. pledges on extended deterrence.
저는 미국의 확고한 확장 억제 공약을 전적으로 신뢰합니다. 만일 북한이 핵무기 사용을 기도한다면 미국의 핵 능력을 포함해 한미 동맹과 대한민국 국군의 결연하고 압도적 대응에 직면하게 될 것입니다.
Secretary Austin pinpointed the ongoing challenges from North Korea, including the regime's missile testing program, adding that the determination of the U.S. to defend South Korea is strong.
The U.S. commitment to the defense of the ROK is ironclad, and so is our extended deterrence commitment to your country, which includes the full range of U.S. defense capabilities, including conventional, nuclear, and missile defense capabilities.
Meanwhile, Yoon also became the first foreign president to visit the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, which develops innovative technologies for combat and national security. There, he discussed how such a research environment can lead to technological innovations and measures to bolster bilateral cooperation on defense science and technology. Shin Ha-young, Arirang News.
Korean content on screens big and small has proven to be a hit across the world. Testament to that is South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol attending a forum to share his hopes for greater collaboration between industry insiders here and in the U.S. Our presidential office correspondent Kim Do-yeon reports from Washington, D.C.
President Yoon Suk-yeol wrapped up his Washington, D.C. visit by showing his support for South Korea's media and content industry as he appealed for bigger exchanges between Korean and the U.S. motion picture companies. On Thursday, he attributed the alliance of South Korea and the U.S. for the current success of K-content.
금년이 이제 한미 동맹 70주년이고 저는 다른 무엇보다도 정말 이 젊은 사람들의 이 희생과 헌신에 터잡아서 만들어진 한미 동맹이 70년간 발전해 오면서 우리 대한민국도 정말 전쟁의 폐허에서 세계적인 이제 경제 문화 강국이 됐습니다.
Speaking at a global video content leadership forum, the president addressed representatives from American media powerhouses like Paramount, Warner Brothers, Discovery, NBC Universal, Sony Pictures, the Walt Disney Company, and Netflix. On the Korean side, entertainment companies like CJ, SLL, and Watcha were in attendance. The event was organized by the U.S. Motion Picture Association, a rare move by the industry to come together for a leader of another country. The presidential office explains that to have big-name industry players come together is not common, and it shows the strength South Korean content has in the industry.
And sir, I wanted to say that as I travel around the world, in my current job and in my former job as Assistant Secretary, it's repeated again and again how many countries want to be like Korea, to emulate the success of K content and create their own industry modeled on Korea's success.
President Yoon promised full support for collaboration, saying that he will make sure K content meets the global standard when it comes to running entertainment industries.
저는 이 문화 산업, 이 문화 영역에는 국가 간에 국경이 없다고 생각합니다. 뭐 다른 요새 모든 경제 이런 통상 분야가 다 마찬가지지만 특히 문화는 국가가 경계를 해 놓으면은 안 되는 거라고 저는 생각합니다.
South Korea's Minister of Culture Park Bo-gyun was part of the delegation on this trip and was involved in arranging the forum. It's the first time that a culture minister has joined a South Korean president on a trip to the US. And with the support of the ministry, the Korea Creative Content Agency and the Korea Film Council together signed an MOU with Netflix to foster more talent in the production industry among young Koreans while expanding Korean content globally. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News, Washington, D.C.
Meanwhile, Seoul's Culture Ministry signed an MOU with the U.S. Smithsonian Institution to boost cultural exchanges. This marks the first official MOU between the two entities, although official exchanges started in 1961 when the American National Museum of Natural History displayed a statue of Buddha from the Goryeo period. Further collaboration is now expected in the fields of culture and history. Artwork donated by the late Samsung chairman Lee Gun-hee is scheduled to go on display at the National Museum of Asian Art in Washington, D.C. in 2025. Boosting cultural exchanges and promoting K-content has been a big part of President Yoon's state visit. So what's behind the rising interest from the U.S. market in Korean movies and series? Our Kim Hyun-sung takes a look.
With home-produced music, movies, and series dubbed the Korean Wave, now swelling to be more of a tidal wave, Korean productions were one of the centerpieces of this Seoul, Washington summit. In fact, present at the Global Video Content Leadership Forum today, South Korean Culture Minister Park Bo-gyun said that three things define the summit: security, economy, and culture, and that the forum reflects the heightened global reputation and influence of Korea video content. Korean motion pictures are also bringing home the big bucks. Netflix announced a $2.5 billion investment in South Korean productions after meeting with President Yoon on his U.S. trip. Then what's behind this recent success? Experts say that it comes from giving common themes a unique South Korean zest. The movie Parasite and Netflix series Squid Game pointed out poverty and the divide in class, a theme relatable to many. But within the theme was a Korean flavor. For example, in Parasite, there is Panjiha, the South Korean semi-basement home, and japaguri, the popular Korean instant noodle recipe. This gives Korean productions that extra punch.
There are Korean elements that are overarching universal themes, so it feels fresh yet familiar to viewers worldwide.
Some also say that ironically, it's the low production cost that propelled Korean productions to success. Squid Game, for example, despite being one of the most popular shows on Netflix, cost about $2.4 million per episode. Pennies compared to other hit shows like Stranger Things and The Crown, which cost at least $8 million. From a conference at Stanford University earlier this month, Professor Daphne Azur said that it's that hungry mindset that set Korean stories apart. With the opportunity cost fairly low, Korean productions have more room to accept new ideas and new challenges, making them a one-of-a-kind in the worldwide production scene. Kim Hyun-sung, Arirang News.
Now, back here at home, the Special Forces of South Korea and the U.S. performed military parachuting jump on Friday to mark their 70-year-old alliance. The South Korean Army said around 20 military personnel took part at a training site in Hanam, located just southeast of Seoul. One of the soldiers jumped out of a UH-60 helicopter, holding a banner that read, "We go together." Others carried the national flags of South Korea and the U.S. Also on Friday, to maintain a strong combined defense readiness, the deputy commander of the South Korea-U.S. Combined Forces Command, An Byung-seok, paid a visit to a marine base on Baekneung-do Island, the westernmost point of South Korea. South Korea is expected to be restored to Japan's list of countries eligible for preferential export treatment. Japan's Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry announced through a press release on Friday that it began the process to redesignate South Korea as a Group A or whitelist country. Once South Korea is reinstated, all the export curbs that have been imposed on the nation since 2019 will have been lifted. This, as the Japanese government last month rolled back export restrictions of 3 key semiconductor materials, and after South Korean and Japanese authorities held Director General level talks this week in Tokyo. The South Korean government earlier this week reinstated Japan as a favored trade partner. South Korea's overall industrial production in March saw the biggest on-month rise in a year on the back of increased chip production. Retail sales were also up, but facility investment fell due to sluggish performances in the chip sector. Our Lee Soo-jin tells us more.
South Korea's overall industrial production last month recorded the biggest on-month rise since March last year. Data released by Statistics Korea show last month's industrial production was up 1.6% compared to the previous month. The nation's industrial production across all sectors rose in December and continued to either remain the same or increase compared to the previous month. The agency attributed last month's rise largely to strong performances by the mining and manufacturing sector, which rose 5.1% from the previous month. That's the largest on-month rise in almost 3 years. The on-month rise in the sector was mostly driven by a surge in semiconductor production. Chip production rose over 35%, marking the biggest jump in more than 14 years. But Statistics Korea says this is due to temporary factors such as the base effect.
Semiconductor production saw a large rise of 35.1% this month, but on a quarterly basis, production fell 9.1% in the first quarter of 2023 compared to the quarter before.
Retail sales, a barometer for consumer demand, also rose 0.4%, the figure recording an on-month rise for the second consecutive month. The agency, however, remains cautious.
It's too early to say that the economy has begun to fully recover.
Facility investment was down 2.2% compared to the previous month, declining once again after recording an on-month increase in February. The drop was mostly due to decreased investment in transportation equipment such as ships. Lee Soo-jin, Arirang News.
South Korea's auto exports jumped 41% in the first quarter of 2023 from a year earlier to set a new record. According to data released by the Korea Customs Service on Friday, exports of passenger cars in the January to March period reached $15.42 billion. The number of cars shipped increased by 31% over that period to 680,000 units. Exports of eco-friendly cars, including electric vehicles, rose 68.4% to a record $6 billion following the normalized supply of automotive chips and rising demand. As part of efforts to attract more tourists and boost domestic demand, starting this Sunday and for the first time in 3 years, South Korea is resuming transit visa exemptions. The Justice Ministry announced on Friday that travelers who have an entry visa, such as a re-entry permit, or are permanent residents of the United States, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, or 32 European nations, and are transiting through Korea to either of these countries, their home country, or a third destination, can stay for up to 30 days without a visa. The same will apply to Chinese elementary, middle, and high school students who are on a school trip to Korea, but only if the trip has 3 or more people, including a supervisor. Visa-free entry will be expanded to more travelers next month. More details can be found on the Justice Ministry's website. The new brand slogan for South Korea's capital city of Seoul has been decided as Seoul, My Soul. On Friday, the city government announced the results of an online vote that was held on its official website from February 15th to March 16th. The poll saw over 260,000 people participating, and Seoul, My Soul received 63% of the votes, beating its competitor, Seoul for You. The city will unveil the slogan's design once it's finalized.
Make sure to have your umbrellas handy tomorrow. The entire nation will see another round of spring showers. Rain has already started for parts of the south, and they will spread nationwide by tomorrow morning. After the rain, morning temperatures will plunge to 9 degrees on Sunday. Please be extra careful not to catch a cold under such fluctuating weather conditions. Rain clouds will be heavily clustered across the south of the country. Jeju Island will see the most amount of rainfall with up to 60 millimeters. The south coast will see 10 to 40. The rest of inland regions, including the Seoul metropolitan area, will see 5 to 20 millimeters. Morning conditions will be a tad warmer tomorrow. Seoul and Gyeongju will be starting off at 15 degrees. And daytime highs won't be rising too much. Seoul will be hiking up to 17 degrees, Gwangju 18, Daegu and Gyeongju will be topping out at 21 degrees. And for next week, warmer daytime conditions are expected with wide temperature gaps. Have a great weekend and hear the weather conditions around the world.
That is all for this Friday night's newscast. Thank you for watching. Have a great weekend and a good night.
I'm live!
저를 도와주시는 분들이
저희와 함께 해주시는 세션분들
아무리 봐도 없지. 텐션 같은데 아니라고 아무도 안 하는 거고.
좋아요.